"Daddy, can we go home now?" The words hung in the air like a crack of thunder, shattering the polished hum of conversation. Every head in the room turned toward the small boy who had spoken, his voice steady, his eyes fixed on the man in the midnight suit at the center table. The billionaire froze, his glass halfway to his lips, fingers tightening around the stem as though it were the only thing keeping him steady. Across the room, a woman in a maid's uniform stood motionless near the buffet, a silver tray balanced in her hands. Her knuckles were pale from the force of her grip, her face flushed, not with embarrassment, but with a fury she had swallowed for 6 long years. Only moments ago, the room had been alive with the clink of crystal glasses beneath golden chandeliers, the scent of expensive perfume curling through the air, and the quiet rhythm of calculated laughter. Here, every word was weighed, every glance a negotiation, and perfection was the unspoken price of admission. But now, perfection had cracked, and the truth, the one truth they had all worked so hard to bury, was forcing its way into the light. Before we dive deeper, let us know in the comments where you're watching from. We'd love to hear from you. And don't forget to hit that subscribe button so you never miss any of our upcoming videos. Who was this boy? And why had he just called one of the richest men in America, Daddy, in front of an audience that measured worth in secrets as much as in money? Why was the woman in the maid's uniform, tray still clutched in her trembling hands, watching the scene unfold with the sharp, unblinking focus of someone who had been waiting for this moment, perhaps for years? And what had happened 6 years ago that made a single word so dangerous, so capable of unraveling reputations and dismantling empires? To those in the room, it looked like an innocent question from a child. But to the man in the midnight suit, and to the woman whose knuckles whitened around polished silver, it was a trigger. A key turning in a locked door that was never meant to open. Behind their composed faces, a history was clawing its way back into the present, one that the city's elite had buried deep, confident it would never surface again. But now it had, and the only thing more dangerous than the truth was the silence that had kept it hidden for so long. The woman in the maid's uniform was named Sarah Miller. To the guests in that ballroom, she was part of the scenery, polite, efficient, and forgettable. But Sarah's life had never been forgettable to her. Born in a small Midwestern town to a family that worked with their hands, she learned early how to stretch a dollar and hide her struggles behind a practiced smile. She worked hard from her teenage years, taking whatever jobs she could to support herself. When the opportunity came to work as live-in staff for one of the wealthiest families in the state, she took it. Not because it was glamorous, but because it meant stability and a chance at something better. Sarah became known for her quiet efficiency, her ability to anticipate needs before they were spoken, and her habit of staying invisible in a world where being noticed could be dangerous. But invisibility doesn't erase history, and hers was tied irrevocably to the man she now served drinks to from across the room. The man in the midnight suit was Alexander Grant. To the public, he was the face of success, a billionaire industrialist whose name was etched into hospital wings, museum halls, and university buildings. He graced the covers of magazines, smiled for cameras at charity galas, and spoke with practiced charm on television interviews. But within the quiet corners of boardrooms and private clubs, there were whispers, rumors of deals made in the shadows, of loyalties bought and sold, of relationships discarded the moment they became inconvenient. None of it was ever proven. And for men like Alexander, unproven meant untouchable. The boy who had called him Daddy was Jacob Miller. At 6 years old, Jacob had no understanding of wealth or reputation. He knew only that his mother worked long hours, that they moved often, and that certain questions were met with silence. He saw other children with fathers who came to school plays and soccer games, fathers whose names were spoken freely. His life was different, though he didn't know why. What he did know was that somewhere, deep in his memory, there was a face that matched the man now standing before him in that glittering ballroom. The ballroom at the Hamilton Grand was dressed for spectacle that night. Glittering chandeliers poured light across polished marble floors, each reflection stretching like liquid gold. The air hummed with whispered conversations. business alliances disguised as small talk, fortunes shifting quietly behind smiles. Sarah Miller moved between the tables as she had for countless events before, her black uniform pressed, her silver tray balanced with precision. Guests didn't notice her. That was part of her skill. She blended in, slipping between clusters of silk gowns and tailored suits, refilling glasses without a word. At her side, Jacob Miller held her free hand, his small fingers wrapped around hers. He had been told to stay close, to watch and listen, but not to speak unless spoken to. Yet in a moment she couldn't predict, his grip loosened. She glanced down. He was gone. Sarah's pulse quickened as she spotted him weaving through the crowd, ducking between chairs, moving with the single-minded focus only a child can have. He stopped directly in front of Alexander Grant. The billionaire's conversation faltered mid-sentence as he looked down at the boy now standing before him. Then Jacob spoke, his voice clear, unshaken. "Daddy." The word sliced through the hum of the room. Alexander froze, his hand still clutching the stem of a glass, eyes widening as if searching the crowd for an explanation. Conversations fell silent. Heads turned. The polished facade of the gala cracked in an instant. A wave of murmurs swelled, bouncing off marble and glass until it became a heavy, suffocating quiet. Sarah stood rigid near the buffet, the tray still balanced in her hands. Outwardly, she didn't move, but inside her heart was pounding with a force she could feel in her throat. The fury she had buried for 6 years pressed against her ribs, daring her to let it out. And in that moment, the years of silence shattered, and every lie began to unravel. The silence in the ballroom lasted only seconds, but the damage was already done. A ripple of whispers moved through the crowd, each hushed exchange carrying the weight of speculation. Sarah Miller didn't move. She watched as Alexander Grant's gaze flicked to her and then away, his jaw tightening. Without a word, he set his glass down, signaled to a man in a dark suit near the wall, and began moving toward the exit. Security closed in, not aggressively but with the quiet precision of people used to handling delicate situations without attracting cameras. By morning there was nothing delicate about it. The story had slipped past the walls of the Hamilton Grand and into the hands of the press. Headlines called Jacob Miller, the mystery child, and speculated on why the city's most visible billionaire had been confronted in public. Talk radio hosts and online forums buzzed with theories, each one building on the last until the truth was buried under layers of gossip. Private investigators began asking questions, some hired by tabloids hungry for scandal, others by parties whose names were never attached to any paperwork. They dug into Sarah's past, tracing her employment history, and it didn't take long for the connection to emerge. 6 years earlier, she had worked in Alexander Grant's private household. The records were clean, but to those who knew where to look, the details were telling. A sudden resignation, no forwarding address, and a non-disclosure agreement filed quietly under corporate legal expenses. Former staff members recalled small, strange details from that time. Restrictions on who could enter certain parts of the house, Sarah's room positioned away from other staff quarters, nights when she was seen walking alone on the estate grounds long after midnight. Some remembered Alexander's closed-door meetings that stretched past midnight, the kind of meetings where voices were low but tension was high. Rumors spread quickly, whispers of multiple affairs, suggestions that Jacob might not be the only child connected to Alexander Grant in a way that would be inconvenient if it ever reached the public. None of it was confirmed, but in the court of public opinion, truth mattered less than perception, and perception was starting to turn. The speculation came to an abrupt end when a document surfaced online late one night, a laboratory report stamped and dated just weeks earlier. It was a DNA test, and the results were clear. Alexander Grant was the biological father of Jacob Miller. Within hours, the leak had been picked up by every major outlet, each headline louder than the last. The city woke to the kind of scandal that couldn't be spun away by publicists or buried under legal threats. Sarah Miller had been silent until that moment, but when the truth was out, she no longer saw any reason to keep the rest of the story hidden. She revealed that 6 years earlier, she and Alexander had been in a relationship, a private arrangement that existed behind closed doors, out of sight of the world Alexander showed the public. When she became pregnant, everything changed. The warmth was replaced by distance, the conversations by legal documents. She was asked to leave the estate immediately. The terms were clear: a payoff large enough to secure a modest future and a non-disclosure agreement that bound her to silence. She left without protest, not because she agreed, but because she believed it would protect her child. She moved away, changed her name and employment records, and worked jobs that kept her far from the circles Alexander inhabited. Her return to the city had not been planned as an act of confrontation. Life's circumstances had brought her back, and the job at the Hamilton Grand had been just that, a job. But when Jacob spoke in that ballroom, when he called the man who had erased them both Daddy, it unearthed everything she had spent years forcing down. Her anger was never about recognition or status. It was about the lie that had shaped her son's life, that had told him his father was a stranger, that had forced him to grow up in the shadow of a truth he didn't even know existed. Public sympathy leaned toward Sarah Miller, but sympathy didn't erase the damage. The scandal had pulled her into a spotlight she never wanted, where strangers dissected her past and questioned her motives. Jacob Miller's face, once just another boy in a crowd, was now on screens across the country. His life at school changed overnight. Some parents whispered, some children repeated what they had heard at home. Alexander Grant's empire began to crack. Contracts were pulled, board members distanced themselves, and lucrative deals vanished. But he remained wealthy, powerful enough to weather the financial storm, even if his public image would never fully recover. In private, he fought to regain control, sending offers, legal threats, and pleas, all aimed at putting the matter to rest. Sarah refused every one of them. "I don't want his fortune. I want my son to know the truth." It was the same answer, every time. But the truth had its own price. There was no reunion, no shared future for father and son. Alexander stayed away, whether out of pride, shame, or cold calculation, no one could say. And when the noise finally faded, what remained was a quiet reality. Sarah had kept her integrity, Jacob had his answer, and Alexander had lost something money could not buy. But no one walked away whole. In the stillness of their small apartment one evening, Jacob's voice broke the silence. "I just wanted to know my dad." Sarah closed her eyes, knowing that some wounds don't heal. They simply become part of the story. What would you have done if you were Sarah Miller? Would you have chosen silence to protect your peace, or would you have risked everything to tell the truth, knowing it might change nothing in the end? Was this justice, or was it simply the painful confirmation of a truth already suspected? When reputations fall and fortunes crumble, does anyone truly win? Or are some battles destined to leave everyone with scars? Let us know in the comments where you're watching from. We'd love to hear from you. And don't forget to hit that subscribe button so you never miss any of our upcoming videos.